Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. The Biden administration doesn't want American troops to stay beyond August 31st, but it remains open to extend the deadline if necessary. It might be late, but it isn't wrong to change course to save more lives. What could be done differently for the withdrawal? If you're an Android user, watch out for the Joker virus. The Belgian police warn the malware has returned. Sometimes good people make bad decisions. What would you do if you wronged someone but came to realize your mistake? A restaurant customer from York Beach, Maine could inspire all of us. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. The Supreme Court on Tuesday ordered the Biden administration to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, officially known as the MPP program. The court ruled that the administration had acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner. Biden suspended MPP in January after he took office. In June, the Department of Homeland Security officially terminated the policy. The move triggered a lawsuit from Texas and Missouri accusing the DHS of failing to provide reasoned justification for the termination. The repeal of the Remain in Mexico has undoubtedly created incentives for illegals crossing the border, but the White House doesn't seem to be concerned. The Supreme Court cited its opinion from 2020 when it rejected the Trump administration's effort to end DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals from the Obama era. The court ruled at the time that ending DACA was an arbitrary and capricious act. Now the same ruling has circled back to Biden. Leaders of the G7 voiced a strong and clear position on the evacuation from Afghanistan. The group agreed that the Taliban must let people evacuate after the 31st. The leaders, including the United States, held an emergency meeting on Tuesday to work out a joint approach to dealing with the evacuation currently in chaos, with the consensus that it is very likely Afghanistan will have a Taliban government for a second time. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that if the Taliban doesn't agree to the extension, the G7 will use considerable leverage in economics, diplomacy, and politics to punish the terrorist group. While Johnson and other allies pushed Biden to extend the deadline, that mission seems to have morphed into a plan to apply pressure on the Taliban. German Chancellor Angela Merkel told reporters that they are still looking for a way to make sure evacuations are possible after the deadline. Merkel emphasized the leading role that America plays in the process. She said, quote, "Without the U.S., we can't continue with the evacuations. This must be made clear." Being the country that declared the war on terrorism 20 years ago, how America withdraws from Afghanistan is critical to all parties involved. However, the big problem is statements from the White House have been ambiguous and ever-changing. At times, mixed messages like this one came about. Americans and Afghan allies are desperate for a positive answer that they will be able to get out of the country. However, a different scenario developed on Tuesday. Following a secret meeting between CIA Director William Burns and Taliban leader Mullah Baradar, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby came out saying that he had no change to the end of the month deadline. But just a couple hours later, at the White House press briefing, Jen Psaki signaled the administration stays open for a possible extension. The completion of the mission would depend on, quote, continued coordination with the Taliban. And Biden has asked the Pentagon and the State Department for a backup plan to adjust the timeline. This contradicts what John Kirby said earlier. You should know that meeting the August 31st target means American troops in Afghanistan will go to zero by that time. Today is August 25th, 6 days away from the deadline. How many Americans have been evacuated? 4,000? 5,000? And how many Americans exactly still remain in the country? At the time we were preparing for the show, there was no reliable answer, because the withdrawal plan should be based on the numbers of U.S. citizens and Afghan allies who need to be rescued and how fast we can rescue them, not how cooperative the Taliban is. The aggressive evacuation deadline has put tremendous pressure on the military, which seems to be a neglected part of the crisis. The military functions in a top-down approach. When given orders, soldiers go out and get it done as quickly as they can. But that doesn't mean their capability is unlimited. Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin said U.S. troops have been scrambling to keep up with the administration's deadline and contradictory messaging surrounding the evacuation. Griffin said the target of moving 100,000 people out in a matter of a little over a week is a mission impossible. At the same time, the troops also expected to pull out completely by the same deadline. That's why they were starting to withdraw again on Tuesday. There were fewer of them at the airport on August 24th than there were previously, although the Pentagon claimed the departure wouldn't affect the evacuation target. The Biden administration said the withdrawal process was always going to be difficult no matter what. This is actually true in a way that it has to be meticulously planned and executed. The swift withdrawal it had wished for wasn't feasible. So how could it have been done differently? Besides the obvious answer of getting all Americans out before removing the troops. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo stressed a deterrence model. We know that the Trump administration first brokered a withdrawal deal with the Taliban in February last year. From that point on until Biden took office, American troops in Afghanistan had been reduced by 83%, from 15,000 to 2,500. But it had never got to the condition where the previous administration felt comfortable to go to zero. As part of the deal, the Trump administration agreed to free 5,000 Taliban soldiers from the prison. While the U.S. kept its pact, the Taliban repeatedly broke the agreement. However, whenever that happened, the Trump administration would respond with force. But after Biden came to office, the U.S. didn't take any action when the Taliban kept violating the agreement. The deterrence model was gone. Either the new administration doesn't acknowledge the previous agreement or it is too weak to respond. We all need to ask ourselves, why would the Taliban bother to comply with it? Another key difference is on the treatment of military equipment. Pompeo said he couldn't tell how many times he heard Trump talk to the military that removing the equipment had to be part of the planning process for the withdrawal. Yet there's another aspect to consider. It's no doubt that once the U.S. leaves, the conflict between Taliban and Afghan National Army will escalate. Of course we want the Afghan army to fight the Taliban, so the U.S. had to leave the weapons. But how many and what weapons to give them is the center of the problem. However, to everyone's dismay, the Afghan army surrendered to the Taliban with little to no resistance, and in many cases just handed over the weapons. Had the Biden administration not realized this would happen? The Taliban started its offensive months ago. The cost of leaving American weapons and equipment in massive amounts is too high. You are essentially arming the terrorists. What's worse, if you watch yesterday's program, the CCP and the Taliban are very close now. You can bet the CCP will pay the Taliban for some of the U.S. weapons. Yesterday, the Taliban held its second press conference. It's taken governing very seriously and called on the United States to stop inviting Afghans to flee the country. The group's decade-long spokesman, Zabihullah Mujahid, claimed its people, engineers, doctors, and those who have been educated are flying away and the country needs their talents. In order to curb the drain, Mujahid said they are going to block Afghans' access to the airport. The Taliban didn't say when the ban would take effect, but it certainly overturned what it had promised earlier on, that they would allow Afghans who wish to leave the country to do so. The group incessantly violated the withdrawal agreement with the U.S. What else would you expect from them? And coming up, Joker malware is back, and a restaurant hostess gets a nice surprise when a rude customer apologizes. But before we continue, I just want to stress how important it is as the viewer to help us get the truth out to as many people as possible. Please take the time to like this video and share it across all your social media. Also, double check and make sure you are still subscribed to the channel. And click on the bell so that you can be notified every time we post a new video. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support. Okay, let's get back to the show. If you're an Android user, be aware of the Joker malware. The Belgian police recently warned the virus has returned. Joker hacks Android devices and hides itself in various apps in the Google Play Store. It automatically subscribes the account to paid services without authorization from the user. Without notice, the virus could eventually deplete victims' bank accounts. The Joker virus first caught people's attention in 2017. Since then, Google Play has removed around 1,700 apps infected with the malware before they were downloaded by users. Last September, the malware emerged again. It was found in 24 Android apps, with more than 500,000 downloads before being removed. In the beginning, apps infected with Joker carried out fraud via SMS. Then it evolved into attacking online payments. These two techniques took advantage of the integration of telephone operators with vendors. Gaining access to SMS and online payments both require verification of the device, but not the user. The malware managed to automate payments such as premium or the most expensive usage of the app without users' consent. The infection isn't egregious in the sense of the amount of money it siphons each time, but this is precisely where things become malicious. Through unauthorized subscription, hackers would steal up to $7 per subscription per week. Banks usually don't suspect subscriptions with small charges. The theft very often goes unnoticed until victims review their account transactions. Here's a list of apps that were found to contain the Joker malware. Most of them have been removed from the Google Store, but that doesn't mean they were uninstalled on people's phones. If you have any of these on your Android device, delete them immediately and check your bank account. Have you ever mistreated someone and regretted it afterward? You had no idea why you behaved like that and wanted to make it up? A customer from York Beach, Maine reminds us we can always apologize sincerely when this happens. But this is not easy. It takes tremendous courage and character to admit you're wrong. That's why such apologies rarely happen, but it doesn't mean people weren't feeling bad about them. And very importantly, the recipient will deeply appreciate your effort. An anonymous customer just lost it with Tammy Ramsey, manager and hostess at the restaurant in the Union Bluff Hotel in York Beach. The incident occurred on July 5th when a man who was with a large party and had difficulty getting seated yelled at Ramsey and her colleagues at the podium and then left. Ramsey has been working with the restaurant for nearly 25 years. She has seen her share of rough customers. Knowing the nature of her profession, Ramsey said she doesn't let bad behavior affect her easily. So on that day, she continued her work unfazed until she received a letter from the man who had yelled at her. Can you please give this $100 along with my apology to the girl who was at the hostess station taking names to be seated for dinner on Monday, July 5th at around 5 to 6 p.m. I was very rude to her, which is out of character for me. I have way more respect for people than I showed that day. Pre-dinner cocktails before getting to the bluff may have contributed, no excuse. When our large party was having difficulty being seated and the wait was longer than I thought, I said loudly the bad word and I left. I feel bad. This coming from a guy who tells people to be kind to service staff and tip big post-pandemic. How hypocritical. I will apologize to her in person the next time I'm in York. I have been going to York every year for the 4th of July week with my family for over 25 years. The man signed the letter, embarrassed customer. Ramsey was very touched. She felt his apology was genuine. She said it goes a long way with people owning up to having a fault and making a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, but not everybody apologizes for them or owns up to it. It was the first time in 25 years of service that she received a letter of apology and a tip. It's quite commendable. Ramsey shared the letter on a Facebook group called Seacoast East, which includes restaurant workers, owners, and sometimes customers, and the post went viral. The popularity of the letter says how much people agree with the experience of the embarrassed customer. Sometimes good people make bad decisions. This is okay, and people all understand. However, we should all have more courage, be more selfless, and try harder to admit our wrongs, apologize, and be better next time. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out the playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me in the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, Parler, and Getter. Don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in touch. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.